And so they use a miss or a sleight of hand or a deception tactic like that, using theodolites and measuring reciprocal zenith angles would actually prove curvature, when in actuality they don't. It doesn't in any way. It's impossible. And the way that you put it together and showed that the perspective, how things actually get smaller, therefore you would actually have to angle your line of sight down to have it align with anything. It's ridiculous that someone would think that they could measure and draw a line from the street pole in front of them to the street pole at the end of their street and think that they were both supposed to be level in the picture.
Yeah, that's a cartoon world, right? It's two-dimensional if that is the case.
Yeah, well, they played the perspective orthographic trick again, and it wasn't that many years ago when you brought out the Mall Angel video and you caught Sly Sparkane, or was it? Yeah, it was Sly Sparkane doing the exact same thing, trying to state that no matter how far a house was, the doorknob in front of the house would always be level no matter how far you walked away from it. So it's nothing new that these shills have been trying to do it. It's just this time you really put the focus and attention to creating the graphics and the content. And the video's great. Are we going to watch it start to finish?
But what if I told you the entire reciprocal zenith angle argument collapses the moment you remember something as simple as perspective? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand reciprocal zenith angles better than every spaceball shill on YouTube. Let's start with their argument in their own words.
So basically, I created a level line. Here's the target set at milepost 27. And that target is at elevation 5930. And then I set the theodolite up at milepost 28, and I measured up 4.78 feet, which means that the telescope is at elevation 5930. So the target and the theodolite are at the same elevation. And when I set my scope to be horizontal, I looked through, and what did I see? I noticed that the horizontal crosshair is over the target. It should be on the target, right? It should be on the target, but it's over the target. Now you look at the sketch and you start to understand why do we see the crosshair over top of the target from both ends of the line. Why is that? There's the target right there, and this is the zenith angle is set to 90 degrees. In other words, that's set horizontal. So you look at the sketch here, and that's because the horizontal plane is perpendicular to your vertical direction at this end. So you're going to have this situation, and there's your drop of the curve. And then if I extend this line out, you're going to have the same situation. Horizontal plane is perpendicular to the vertical plumb line.
Quote, if the vertical plumb directions were parallel, the zenith angles at each end of the line would sum to 180 degrees, but they never do. So here's his claim in plain English. Measure the zenith angle from A to B, measure the zenith angle from B to A, add them. He says if Earth were flat, these angles would add to exactly 180 degrees. They don't. Therefore, according to him, the Earth must be curved. And this is the hill they've chosen to die on. And if you don't understand optics or perspective, this might sound scientific, but here's what he forgot, and this is a fatal omission. The entire reciprocal zenith angle argument only works if objects never shrink with distance, if angular size never changes, if perspective doesn't exist, if the atmosphere does not affect visibility, if the ground plane does not rise. No angular size reduction, no perspective convergence, no atmospheric extinction, no ground plane rise, no contrast loss, no angular resolution limit, no atmospheric layers, no perspective lowering of distant tops. He assumes a cartoon universe, not the one you live in. They assume objects stay the same apparent height at all distances. That has never happened in the history of vision. To make this undeniable, let's use a 3D modeling program. These surveyors are all identical. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Each spread out at even increments. Now watch what happens when the camera is in a realistic perspective mode. The farther they are, the smaller they appear. Their heads drop. Their entire body compresses downward on a perfectly flat plane. This alone destroys the reciprocal zenith angles argument. And now, orthographic mode. In orthographic, nothing shrinks, nothing lowers. Everything stays the same height no matter how far away it is. This is exactly how the spaceball shills think your eyes work. Reciprocal zenith angles only prove curvature if your eyes and the world run in orthographic mode, which they don't. Watch what happens when a person walks away on flat ground. This is perspective 101. The top drops, the bottom disappears first. All of these poles are the same height. And this is what your eyes see: shrinking, dropping, converging. That's perspective, not curvature. On a flat highway, the road rises, the cars shrink, lower portions fade first. This is the 3D world being projected into our vision. Parallel shelves converge. Verticals lean inward. Everything funnels to one horizon point. This same geometry controls distant objects outdoors. A distant skyline compresses. Bottom fades. Top flattens downward. This is atmospheric extinction, light scattering, contrast loss, occlusion layers. Even giant mountains shrink, drop, flatten, and fade. People, telephone poles, cars, aisles, skylines, mountains, all obey exactly the same optical laws. And these laws produce zenith angle differences on any surface. Now that you understand real optics, let's revisit reciprocal zenith angles. They claim that if the Earth were flat, the angles must sum to 180 degrees. That only makes sense if the world has no perspective. The top of the distant object always lowers an angular elevation. This happens in your eyes, in cameras, in binoculars, in 3D software, on any flat plane. What are reciprocal zenith angles actually detecting? Perspective, atmosphere, compression, resolution limits, not curvature. But don't tell the spaceball shills. They think the whole world runs in orthographic mode, like a cartoon. They demand flat Earth should have
parallel plumb lines.
But in their unverified theory of gravity, plumb lines can tilt any direction depending on local mass. Mountains, density pockets, mineral deposits, aquifers, voids, crust thickness. So they literally admit plumb lines can point anywhere, but still demand 180-degree reciprocal zenith angles on a flat plane? Their argument collapses under its own contradictions. To believe reciprocal zenith angles prove curvature, you must believe objects don't shrink with distance. Angular resolution doesn't matter. Perspective doesn't exist. Atmospheric extinction isn't real. Ground plane rise doesn't happen. Tops of objects never drop. Plumb lines only tilt for curvature. Vision works in orthographic mode. This isn't science. This isn't observation. This isn't geometry. It's fan fiction for the unified theory of gravity. Reciprocal zenith angles do not prove a spinning spaceball. They prove spaceball shills do not understand perspective. Welcome back to reality, the fixed and stationary plane. And we have perspective, right? You should not have the expectation ever that if something goes away from you, that it's going to remain the same height. That's just crazy.